Good morning, everybody. Farmer Andrew here. This is day 7 of the sandy brush clearing job. And this morning we started on a couple of little things. On the other end of the property, and I'll walk over there in a second, we started by taking down a bunch of the saplings that are just crowding out this area sort of around the nature trail between the creek and the edge of this grove of trees. And in addition, we were also doing some work over in this little former paddock area over here. So in the process of limbing this tree which has fallen, the clients have a friend who's going to come and remove this with a chainsaw for firewood purposes. And so what I've done is I've limbed it, I've cut the tip off of it. All the limbs here I'm going to further decompose. There is a very damp spot along the trail, like a natural seep of some sort. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of these cedar boughs here, which are nice and green and kind of fluffy, and I'm going to throw them down along the wettest parts of the trail as sort of a stopgap for managing that moisture, because there's a couple of parts on that trail where walking through it you can sink 4 or 6 inches down into the mud. It's just very soft ground. So I'm going to reuse some of the available materials in order to shore up that path until such time as the client is ready to do something a little bit more permanent, whether or not that be with gravel or mulch or bark chips or whatever. That's up to them. We are also working a little further on this former corral area here. So you can see I've got the fence and the T-posts exposed along the perimeter here. And this is something I like to do when I'm clearing any sort of object that's resident in the environment. I like to make it not only cleared, but completely accessible on both sides. So I've got probably a 3 to 5 foot standoff around this old fence. The clients are planning on removing it at some point, but in the short term, I'm using it also to contain the goats. So we're making use of some of the naturally, formerly existing materials in order to make sure that the goats don't wander off. And I'm going to work on this edge right here, so that's also grown up. We had 2 trees, so this big cedar here, and there's another cedar which I've just exposed this morning over here, which have fallen on that stretch of the fence over there. So what I'm probably going to do is just, if you look at this, I don't know if it's a willow or an alder there, but this tree right there, I'm going to leave the brush up to that tree sort of uncleared. And you can see there's an old T-post there with some wire hanging off of it that connects to this fence line over here. And again, what I'm doing is I'm allowing the natural environment to act as a barrier. The goats are not going to force their way through that thick bramble in order to get at the tender, juicy leaves. They rely on me to clear it. So there are times when you can use the environment itself in order to constrain the goats. And let's just take a quick walk over here. So not much change in this area here. This was all the stuff that we decomposed in the first couple of days of the job. I do have kind of an interesting thing that I don't usually have an opportunity to do. These are just I think I might have talked about this on our last video, but these are poles of cedar, which are the result of me cutting down these little saplings and stripping them of all of their limbs. And I think that there could be some really interesting applications for that wood. I like the idea of using them to line the nature trail. Cedar takes a long while to rot, and so it's one of the reasons why it's used for things like roof shingles. Also, an example of the kind of things I almost always find on all the jobs that I do: big trash that people throw into the thick brush because they think out of sight, out of mind. And I'm almost always encountering some of these things and removing them from the environment on behalf of the client. The boys are slowly working on this remaining patch of blackberry on the hillside in front of the house. We'll get that before we go. All right, and here's this meadow, which has been mostly cleared. There's still a little bit of cleanup work to do on my part. I have a little camp machete I'm going to come out with and cut all these back a little bit closer to the ground. So this is the area that we were working on in the morning, and you can see first thing this morning all of these cedars here, and there's I think a couple of maples mixed in there. We dropped all those. They were all relatively small trees, and the end result is this section right here is just opened way up. You can see through it. It's a lot more light there. So take this area here and contrast it with this area here. You know, it's a wall, it's dark, you can't get through it. This area over here used to resemble this area over here. So that's kind of the difference, right? I can come in and with a bow saw, I can take some of these relatively small, you know, 3-4 inches thick diameter volunteers, and I can take them down to the ground, open all this stuff way up, restore access, make it a nicer, lighter, kind of more visually appealing area. So that is the game plan for the rest of the day today. We'll continue to break this stuff open along the trail. We'll continue to work on that little corral, and we'll just keep on plugging away. Our clients are going out of town for an extended period this Friday, so we're going to put a temporary hiatus on the job on day 10, or after day 10, I should say. And then when they return from Scotland, which will be in 3 weeks or so, we will discuss having me come back and revisit. And they've also discussed the possibility of having me work on some extended areas, like outside the fence there, you can see that big area that's just covered with blackberry brambles underneath those lodgepole pines. So I am always willing to be flexible and negotiable when it comes to the needs of my clients, whether or not it means working longer or shorter times. The goal is to just make sure that everybody's happy when I walk away from the site. So anyway, have a wonderful day. This is Farmer Andrew. Take care.